I am Becky Carter. I'm the art director at NFSTC at FIU. And today, specifically, I'm going to be talking about something called the Better Poster Movement. This was initially developed by a man named Mike Morrison, a PhD candidate in psychology, during his undergrad experiences of poster sessions, basically. His frustrations in a poster, traditional scientific poster, as a method of communication. He identified some shortcomings and did research about how to make it better. So I'm gonna try and bring up a poll here. A few questions. So first, have you ever walked through an in-person poster session? The very large papers on boards, lined up in an expo hall with terrible coffee and lots of people walking around. Okay, we're getting some responses. Thank you very much. So it looks like almost everyone has attended a poster session, and we have about an even split between yes, it was great, and yes, it was overwhelming. That's fair. And let's see. Poll number 2, have you ever presented in a poster session? You're the one standing there in front of the very large piece of paper on a very large board, mainlining very bad coffee. Excellent. Thank you very much for your responses. Let's look at these results here. So most everyone, yes, has presented in a poster session. Some of you liked it, some of you did not. Someone has not. That's great. So let's talk about scientific posters and poster sessions specifically, and how we can maybe make them better for ourselves as well as other people. The whole point of a scientific poster is communication. Communication doesn't occur until our audience receives and understands our message. Now, the traditional scientific poster format has some shortcomings in this area, namely attention, legibility, and comprehension. Basically, an audience cannot understand a message that they can't read, and they will not read a message which isn't interesting to them. There's a great quote from Mike Morrison on what he was trying to accomplish with the Better Poster format, which is a poster that communicates one thing is more effective than a poster which fails to communicate 1,000 things. And an illustration, a mental picture I like to use in communicating this idea is, if I'm facing someone and I have a bowl full of M&Ms and I toss those M&Ms at someone, they're not going to catch most of those M&Ms. They might not catch any of them. But if I have a bag of M&Ms and toss a bag of M&Ms, that is a single message, a single point that I'm trying to communicate, and they're much more likely to get that point. So a scientific poster, we want to start to narrow what we are communicating in order to make sure that we are communicating effectively. The first problem is, how do you get your audience's attention? If you've been in a poster session, and as you can see, this is just a Google image search I did of bad scientific poster design. These are across disciplines, across publication dates, topics, all sorts of things. This is kind of a nightmare. In person, this is even worse. It's very overwhelming, and an audience member will quickly be subject to cognitive overload when faced with a room full of these scientific posters. The first problem is they are all the same. They look the same from far away. It's the classic wall of text problem. Now, we can use some basic design principles to catch a viewer's attention, one of which is Humans are very good at noticing something that doesn't fit or something that stands out. So if your poster visually looks different than the posters on either side or the rest of the posters in the row, you are automatically going to get more of your viewers' attention. I recommend using a template for this. I do not want to throw my fellow graphic designers under the bus, but it is not always practical to hire a graphic designer to create a scientific poster every time you need one. So the Better Poster Project has created some templates that are really plug and play. They're basic PowerPoint files that you paste your content into, and the arrangement is already done for you. You can change colors to match your college or company branding. You can change logos, but the bulk of the work is already done. Secondly, we have a legibility problem, which it should be fairly obvious from the graphics on the screen. Basically, the font is too small. An in-person poster session can be considered to be like a series of signs, like driving past billboards on a highway. Here we see everything is fighting for audience attention, and we as presenters have a limited time to communicate our message and grab that audience attention as they're walking down the aisle trying to decide where to stop, or if maybe they should just go get a sandwich. Fortunately, we have an excellent source. The Americans with Disabilities Act 2010 has issued recommendations for character heights in signs. Signs are information that is viewed on a vertical surface by someone at a known distance, which is remarkably like a scientific poster hanging on a board in an aisle. So based on those recommendations, your poster title, which would likely be scanned by an audience member walking by an aisle at maybe a 10-foot distance, in order for that to even be readable, for a viewer to walk by and recognize letters and form words from them and read it, your capital letters need to have a minimum height of 28.8 millimeters, 1.13 inches, or approximately 120 point type. Now, if you've ever created a poster for a poster session, a very common question is, what's the minimum font size? And if you say 12, 18, 16 points, that's significantly smaller than 120. So that's the first issue. The poster text, basically anything other than the headline, would need to be legible by a viewer discussing with the presenter at about a 6-foot distance or less from the poster. The ADA recommendations for signage at this distance is capital letters greater than or equal to 16 millimeters or 0.63 inches high, which translates to roughly 66 point type. Now for online presentations, for example, such as the presentation I am giving right now, a lot of PowerPoint templates have a minimum 12-point font size built in. And there's what that looks like. This is a little small for on-screen presentation. That's assuming that you are using a projector in a large room to project your presentation, or as we're doing here, full screen. It does not take into account people who may be viewing your presentation on a smaller mobile device, like a tablet or a phone. Type size will very quickly become too small to read. We call this, in design lingo, mice type, and you can see the attributions and references down in the lower right-hand corner. I've used about a 12-point font there. We call it mice type because only mice can read it. It is too small if you're going to be communicating information. It's fine to use for citations, references, other information that may not be immediately necessary for the discussion at hand, but generally you're going to want to use much larger type than most people use. So for this presentation, the slide that you're seeing on screen, the body text is at 28 points. Much more easy to read than the 12 point. The comprehension problem is the one that can be the most difficult to deal with. And it really comes down to the different purpose that a scientific poster fulfills. It is not meant to be a thesis defense. It is not the equivalent of your algebra teacher telling you to show your work. You don't need to prove to an audience that you have done all of the work. What you need to do is make them care. And people only care about what they're interested in. So as a rough illustration, I'm not going to cite the author of this particular poster. I don't want to embarrass anyone, but just to focus on a single poster title, this is the title of this poster. This is a lot. It is a very specific and accurate description of the work that these researchers did, but it is not useful for achieving our communication goals in a scientific poster session or presentation, which is you want to communicate why people should care. A poster should immediately communicate the purpose of your work and not just prove you did the work. You're going to want to lead with your most important result. The very long, very specific, highly technical title is accurate, but it lacks application. Our poster headlines should answer a question like, why I did this work, or why you as a viewer should care, or this is something that I'm really excited about, get excited about it with me. You can always link out to a full paper with all of your citations, examples, results, charts, graphs, references, everything to your heart's content. At the very least, a scientific poster should include your name and your email address. People need to be able to get a hold of you, especially if they want to collaborate. That's the whole point. We want to make sure that our scientific posters are an invitation to questions from other researchers and an opportunity to collaborate even across disciplines and maybe land some sweet grant money. That wouldn't be a terrible thing to happen from a poster session. I recommend using URL shorteners. For example, go.fiu.edu. You can have a very long web address that will shorten down to something very understandable, such as what Michelle did with the presenting URL. You can also use a QR code, and the full template file that's linked in my presentation includes instructions on generating and using QR codes. If you're going to include your email address, I would recommend using an email address that is not affiliated with your school if you are a student. Because if you ever leave that institution, that email address will no longer be valid, but it will still be on all of your published materials. Google is an excellent substitute. You can create a Google Drive folder or a OneDrive folder with all relevant materials to a particular paper or project and create a shareable link to that that you can then distribute that is independent of where you happen to be working at the moment. Use fewer words. 43 words, that title is a lot. And it is too many words for an audience member to read as they are cruising through a poster session. Fewer words mean people can read it. It means they're going to want to read it. It's not intimidating. And you want to use plain language. The specificity of the original title, like I said, it was very accurate, and I am not I'm a lay person, I'm not a scientist, but that title, as I read the title, the abstract, the results and synopses of that particular poster, I understood enough to be able to restate it in plainer language, such as more accurate molecular models for biological simulations. Now, the particular molecules involved, I'm sure, are extremely relevant, and there is no reason why you need to dumb down your headline or title. But by rephrasing your results in more general terms, you open up the ability for the audience to apply your work to their particular interests. So if I am a biological researcher who uses biological simulations, I would know that many molecular models within those simulations are less than accurate. So if I see a poster specifically mentioning more accurate molecular models, that would pique my interest. If I'm a computer programmer working on developing molecular model building software, this is going to pique my interest much more than the initial title. You want to place your work in a larger context so that people can apply it to themselves. Humans are kind of self-centered. I will put myself first in that. And I'm not going to be interested in something if it doesn't seem to apply to anything I'm doing. I have a limited amount of time, either online in a conference or a webinar or an in-person session. I have to prioritize. And if something doesn't appear to apply to me, I'm probably going to skip it. By narrowing your title and making it very specific, you end up eliminating potential collaboration and future science. And that's not really what we're going for. The URL at the top is a shortened URL, and it links to all of the template files from the Better Poster project, as well as explainer slides about how you would use them, how to generate QR codes, information on different font choices, all that. So you can use that however you would like. That is open and available for anyone to download. There are 6 templates that are part of the Better Poster collection. And that collection is designed to clearly communicate the most important result from your research and prompt your audience to ask better questions during a session, whether that's in person or online. Now, these templates are created with the minimum recommended type sizes and appropriate fonts. So all of that is already taken care of. You can sub in your department or college or company logo very easily. The title or headline is always at the top so that in a physical poster session, the headline can be seen and read over people's heads. I'm fairly short, so if I'm in the center of a wide aisle trying to scan posters or topics, it needs to be fairly large and pretty high up there because I'm going to have problems seeing over other people's heads. These template files are sized for physical printing for a poster session, 5 foot by 4 foot approximately. But because we're working with minimum font sizes, these templates work very well as full screen online presentation templates as well. And they can be used as such without further editing. So you don't have to have a print version and an online version. You can just use one file for all. I'm going to briefly go through the first 5 templates in the Better Poster collection. The 6th is actually a process to convert your poster into a slideshow or images for social media. It's important to reach your audience where they are. To that end, the hashtag Better Poster is a great resource on Twitter, both for scientists, science communicators, and people in the design field who are constantly coming up with new solutions to these problems. So we'll go through these. This is kind of the original layout that Mike Morrison developed in the Better Poster concept. Your center panel is going to make it easier for your audience to quickly grasp your ideas. You have a single figure, whether that is a schematic or workflow or particularly relevant results charted out. The headline is very large, easily readable from a distance, and you want to phrase your title so that people are interested without being overly specific and narrowing your audience. The left column includes contact information and a brief description of methods, processes, and results. Again, this is smaller font, but it is meant to be read once someone has had their attention caught by your poster and they're walking up and deciding if they want to ask you questions. If they want to ask you questions, the right column is where you can put a lot of other background information, something that you might want to point to when you're answering a question, ancillary, secondary results, something like that. But the idea of all of these posters is first grab an audience attention, then make them interested in what you have to say, and then encourage them to ask you more questions. A poster session is never meant to be a standalone communication document. It relies on your involvement in the communication process. The second template is for very social presenters, somebody who really likes talking to people. I am not that person. However, if you have a lot of charts or a lot of relevant comparative measurements that you're going to present, this format is really great for that. It allows you to do the talking and give background and explainers and reasoning from your own brain and gives the priority of place to the data. So we have options for data presentation. We still have a very large, bold, easy to read headline. And we have a cool image that kind of relates to the conclusions or the topic of the study. The full template file that's linked includes sources for royalty-free and copyright-free images, none of which involve searching on Google, which will probably result in copyright infringement and is a terrible idea. This version emphasizes a single result, a schematic or a workflow or a particular finding in order to draw your audience's attention. So we have the left column where you can have some explanatory text. Obviously, you still want your contact information there. There's room at the bottom for a QR code. If you have partners that you worked with on this research, they can be cited in the lower right-hand corner. But primarily, you want your findings to be the focus. This is a very special poster. This is a type of data visualization that does not apply to all research topics. This particular poster was produced by Ed Hawkins in his research on the historic average global temperatures over the last few centuries. Let's see, no, 1850 to 2018. I apologize, my chat window was blocking the headline. This is very simple, but it is very attention-getting. What Ed Hawkins discovered was the pattern produced by his data did not require labels to be understood. And this is in no way dumbing down his science, but this type of visualization grabs a lot of attention. And this pattern has been so successful as a communication device, you can get it in a phone case or shower curtain. You can buy leggings with this pattern on it, which is kind of amazing for a scientific research project. And the structure of the poster is very simple. Why are you not advancing? We have an impressive headline. Short, sweet, to the point, relevant information, nothing extra. We have a cool chart. This is a type of data visualization where you might want to contact some liberal arts grads and see what they can come up with. Or maybe you have a friend who majored in fonts and colors you can send your data to them and see what they can come up with. And again, it will not lend itself to every research topic. We have contact information, the name of the presenter, a website where the full paper can be found, a QR code that can be scanned as a link to contact information and the full paper, and you're done. And that's all it takes. For institutions or companies that are maybe more traditional in their requirements for a scientific poster, there is a template that, this one, that does sort of fit more in that style. Some people they're not ready to let go of all the words just yet. But whichever template you choose, the most important thing to remember is to first simplify your language to keep it widely relevant. And also, don't change the font size. Legibility is a serious barrier to communication. And a good rule of thumb is if it doesn't fit, don't include it. All of the support data, any secondary results, even your citations, those can go in a full paper rather than into a scientific poster, because they will just clutter the message. They're extra free-flying M&Ms that aren't helpful when you're trying to catch attention. Like I said, the URL, shortened URL for downloading the full template files is go.fiu.edu/betterposter. And if you are on Twitter, the hashtag #BetterPoster is a great source of information from fellow scientists, other researchers, presenters, people in the design community, and science communication professionals. It's a great follow. People are always coming up with either tweaks to a design or a completely new concept on how to communicate science, which is very exciting, I think. So thank you very much for your time and attention. I do have a request. If anyone uses these templates, I would love to hear how it went. Whether this was an online presentation that you gave or an in-person poster, I would be fascinated to hear what you thought of working with the templates and what your results were during your sessions. You know, if you found it useful or helpful in any way, I'd love to hear about it.